Good morning. I spent the first 10 years of my life in an affluent suburb near Rochester, New York. There were lots of doctors and lawyers, but also some engineers like my father. And my parents tried to fit in, they really did. But they were back to the land hippies at heart. So when I was 8 and I wanted to hatch baby chickens, they encouraged me. And that put us on that slowly but surely collision course with the local zoning board. In most of the United States, you have to hatch chickens in the spring so that they can grow up enough before the first frosts come in the fall. And there are a lot of things that we do and don't do, from diet to language to religious holidays, that have everything to do with the seasons, whether we're aware of that connection or not. And the seasons have everything to do with astronomy, whether we're aware of that or not. You know, there are no seasons in the tropics. When you live near the equator, the sun still rises in the east and sets in the west, but in the middle of the day, it stays pretty much straight overhead all year long. It's warm all day long, all year long. Boring. Well, like many kids, I went through a coin collecting phase. So my grandfather would give me mixed bags of coins from coin dealers that hadn't yet been sorted. And at some point, I found this coin in one of those bags, and I knew it must be extremely valuable, 600 years old. Until I learned that in the tropics, some nations like Morocco follow the lunar calendar, or did until recently. This coin was made in the year that we call 1952. The word month literally means one cycle of the moon's phases, which takes about 29 and a half days. So the 12-month lunar year is about 11 days shorter than the year we're used to, which in turn means that the Lunar New Year rotates around our year, getting further and further behind each cycle. Without seasons, there's no reason not to use a lunar year. And this is why Ramadan doesn't always fall in the same season. Ramadan happens every 12 months, meaning every 12 lunar cycles. So it comes earlier by 11 or 12 days each time around our calendar, rotating through the seasons. In our year 2030, Muslims will begin 2 Ramadans during our year, one in January and then another one the following December. And right now, we are in the year 1447 on the Islamic lunar calendar. The Hebrew calendar is also lunar, but you may have noticed that Rosh Hashanah does not rotate through the seasons. That's because the Hebrew calendar adds an extra month every 2 or 3 years, a leap month, giving it or keeping it roughly aligned with the solar year that we use. It's a lunisolar calendar, that's what it's called. So right now we are in the Hebrew year 5786. Now, one of our UU values is pluralism. So I want to pause here to point out that there is no one right way to count days or seasons or years. There is nothing wrong with a lunar calendar or with letting holidays rotate around the seasons, especially if you live in the tropics. It just kind of makes sense. Our culture prioritized the solar year because Europe has pronounced seasons which rule many aspects of our lives, especially for farmers. And that was a strong pressure to align the year with the seasons, a pressure that wasn't felt in the Middle East. But we could have prioritized the day or the month or had a different calendar completely. And those other approaches are not less civilized. They're just different. Just different. It took a year for my chickens to bother the neighbors enough for a zoning board hearing. But even after my mother's impassioned speech about humility and groundedness, vague concerns about property values proved more persuasive, and my chickens had to go. But within about a year, we moved to an old farmhouse with 7 acres and 3 barns out in the country, which marked the beginning of the second season of my young life, which carried me through my college years. Speaking of college, a significant portion of college graduates believe that the seasons are caused by the Earth being closer to the sun in summer and farther in winter, due to that elliptical, oval nature of Earth's orbit. That is not true. We're actually slightly closer to the sun when it's winter here. You can debunk this closer to the sun idea pretty easily by simply visiting Australia or Argentina in July when they are having winter time. And even though it's mostly desert, I understand that Australia has 15 natural ski areas. When I took astronomy in college, the professor had us use the apparent size of the sun in the sky to calculate our distance from it for each week of the year. And I'm not going to make you do all the trigonometry, but the end result was this. All those textbook drawings of elliptical orbits, including the ones I'm using today, they're all exaggerations. Earth's orbit is elliptical, a little bit oval-shaped, but only slightly. It's darn close to a perfect circle. But that slight ovalness means that the Earth moves a little faster in its orbit around the sun in January and a little slower in July. So if you take a photo of the sky from the same spot at the same time every day, you see this after a year. This is called the solar analemma, and I think it's beautiful. When I remind people that the seasons are reversed in the southern hemisphere, some people then recall that the seasons have something to do with the tilt of the Earth. And so they combine that tilt of the Earth bit with the closer in summer idea, and they imagine something like this picture. This is also wrong, but it's closer to the truth. The seasons are not caused by how close we are to the sun in any way. If you tape a thermometer to a piece of green or blue paper and shine a heat lamp on it, the angle of the light makes a huge difference in the temperature on the paper. You know how much hotter the sun feels at noon than it does in the early morning or the late afternoon. This is why. It's also why the tilt of the Earth causes the seasons. And it's why the climate is colder as you move toward the north and south poles. The light comes in at a lower angle. In the northern summer, the sun beats down on us in Pennsylvania while it whimpers from a low angle in Australia and Chile, where some folks are hitting the ski slopes. Those roles are reversed in our northern winter, like now. So, what causes the Earth to tilt north and south during the year? Well, just as it appears that the sun rises and sets every day, but we know it's actually the Earth's turning that gives that impression, Earth's tilt doesn't change from month to month. The tilt is the angle between its axis, this imaginary line through the poles, the angle between that axis and its orbit, the plane of its orbit around the sun. It could have gone around this way, but it doesn't. It goes this way. So when the North Pole is tilted toward the sun, it's summer in the northern hemisphere because sunlight hits us more straight overhead, letting us flirt on the beach and dig our hands into warm soil. 6 months later, without changing anything but where it is in its orbit, Earth's North Pole is now tilted away from the sun, so the sun's light is more overhead for our southern neighbors, while we are lighting candles and snuggling under blankets. This is how it looks from the ground, looking south from pretty much anywhere in North America over the course of one day. The sun is never straight overhead here at this latitude. It's always to the south of straight overhead, but it gets much higher in the sky during the summer. Now, our year is the solar year, which means one complete orbit around the sun. Simple, straightforward, right? So why do we have leap years? Well, a day is how long it takes Earth to rotate once, and a year is how long it takes for one trip around the sun. And those two amounts of time are completely unrelated. The year is not a nice multiple of days. It's actually really messy. A year is this number of days. So if you start at midnight on New Year's Eve and go to midnight 365 days later, you're already off by that remainder, 0.24217 days, or about a quarter of a day. If you keep that up for 700 years, New Year will happen in the middle of the northern summer. That's no good, right? We want to keep our year aligned with the seasons. But after 4 years, that extra quarter of a day has added up to 0.96868 days, pretty close to a full day. So let's round it up and add a day to that year. Let's call it February 29. All fixed, right? Not so fast. Because we rounded, we overcorrected by 0.03132 days, which is about 45 minutes over 4 years. So do that 25 times, and the overcorrection adds up to being ahead by almost a day. So years that end with 00, like 1900, are not leap years, even though they come 4 years after the last leap year. But then that is also an overcorrection, and I'll leave it to you to do the math and figure out how often we would still need to adjust by a day. I'm sure you'll get right on that. All that math comes from a view of time that the ancient Greeks called chronos. It's a worldview that treats time like a commodity, limited, linear, measurable, quantitative. The chronos view of time is both true and useful, especially in science, and especially in a technological society where we want the planes to run on time, right? But there's another way to imagine time that the Greeks called kairos. In our spiritually bereft society that also treats people like a commodity, especially people's time, I think the kairos perspective, I see that the kairos perspective is making a bit of a comeback. And that's a good thing. Kairos is about the quality of time. Kairos acknowledges that there is a best time, an appropriate season. To everything there is a season, right? Kairos invites contemplation about our role in the world and the timing of our actions. We don't have to make every decision the moment it presents itself. There's a best time, and it isn't necessarily right now. Being decisive is chronos. Taking the pause is kairos. Where chronos measures minutes and seconds, kairos values moments. Chronos is months and years, or kairos is seasons. Seasons of life, seasons of love, seasons of history. Maybe we could use a little more kairos in our worldview now. We tend to divide cycles like the seasons into portions, like spring, summer, winter, and fall. But why 4? It could just as reasonably be 3 or 5 or 8, right? My ancient European ancestors were hunters and gatherers who survived an ice age by paying really close attention to the movement of the sun and the moon and the stars. And they divided the year into 8 parts, all of them tied to the sun's movements in the sky. Stonehenge's alignment testifies to that studious awareness of theirs. And modern pagans have continued that lineage, calling it the wheel of the year. And the 8 points on the pagan wheel are defined by the solstices, when the sun is the highest and lowest in the sky, like this. And between that and the equinoxes, when day and night are the same, about 12 hours each of day and of light and dark. And that's how it appeared to them. And now you know that the solstices are when the Earth's orbit maximizes the tilt towards and away from the sun. And the equinoxes are when the sun is directly over the equator, halfway between those solstices. But then pagans also marked halfway days between the solstices and the equinoxes, making 8 holidays that track the sun's seasonal cycle. And when Christianity came to those European ancestors, their astronomical holidays got co-opted as Christian holidays by different names, mostly, but also mostly on the same dates, the same time of the year. Halfway between Yule and Ostra was Imbolc, when pregnant sheep started making milk, thus ensuring the survival of their human keepers, even in famine years. It was an important holiday. In Germany, celebrations included, for that time of year, included whether a hedgehog saw its shadow, which then became Groundhog Day here in the United States, when the first signs of spring begin to appear. Christians call this day Candlemas, but its timing is pagan. If you grew up in the Christian tradition, you may have wondered why the spring holiday is called Easter anyway. That name is nowhere in the Christian scriptures, and the word has no meaning in English beyond the name of that holiday. German and English are the only languages that name it after an ancient pagan goddess, Ostra. All other languages call it some variation of the word Passover. Ancient pagans celebrated the spring equinox with symbols of fertility: eggs, rabbits, flowers. Might sound a little bit familiar when you think about Easter, huh? And they did that to honor the goddess of fertility, Ostra. The consensus among scholars today is that Jesus died on April 3 on our calendar, which would put Easter on April 5th. But the formula for scheduling Easter combines pagan and Jewish methods. Easter is the first Sunday after the first full moon after the equinox, the spring equinox. Beltane, or May Day, is halfway between the spring equinox and summer solstice. The sun rises a little higher in the sky each day, bringing increasing warmth. Then followed by Litha, the solstice, and then Lughnasadh, the first harvest festival in early August. Christians in the British Isles called it Lammas, blessing the bread made from the first ripe wheat of that year. So astronomy and agronomy dancing together in our inherited culture. Mabon, the fall equinox, comes along in late September, a harvest festival of feasting known by Christians as Michaelmas. Then there's Samhain, which we talked about a couple months ago. Christians called it All Hallows Eve, and in our secular society, we call it Halloween. And then we're back around the wheel to Yule, the darkest and coldest time of year, when warmth and light from candles and Yule logs helps us remain faithful that spring will return. And of course, we also hang up green things and holly and berries and things like this. Around the time that my family moved out to the country, beginning that second season of my life, my father left his engineering job to start a bulk food store in Rochester. And I remember that there was a poster in the back office of that store, a quote from Paramahansa Yogananda about the seasons of life. And when Ann first heard a draft of this sermon, she said, "We have the poster. It's in the crawl space." So apparently I grabbed it when my dad downsized, so I was able to actually take a picture of it. It says, "The child is busy with play. The youth is busy with his senses. The man is busy with worries. Who thinks of God? Yet he is the something else that all are seeking." Aside from all those male pronouns, I think that's why we UUs come to church. We may have little in common about that something else and lots of different names and imaginings for it, but I think we're all seekers of something beyond seasons, something eternal and serene. I'm currently in a season of life that the quote doesn't really address, a season where I play with less tangible toys, and my senses are a bit less dependable than they used to be, and the worries of parenting have dissipated some. And all of this provides a bit more time to reflect on the profound and the ultimate, however we might name and perceive it. This is also a season of weddings among our children and their friends, and funerals among our friends and our parents. Both seem to come at us rapid fire lately. And it's a reminder that every life brings seasons of joy and sorrow. This is why we share them in community. We live in different emotional hemispheres. My winter is your summer, and someone else's spring. And I think that's a good thing. Our joys and sorrows rituals happen in Kairos time, moments and seasons. Just as in the heat of summer I might fantasize about snow, in a winter of loss I might long for glimpses of joy. When I'm in a dark December of grief, sharing your June-like joy reminds me that seasons change, even mine. It's a reminder that, of course, I will be sad and enraged and jealous and hurt. Of course, I will experience ecstasy and laughter and the giddy joy of triumph. That's just how seasons work. Once we moved to the farm, it didn't stop with chickens. We had ducks, geese, turkeys, bees, a huge garden. We were far more exposed to the seasons, but life was better for it. A little more Kairos, a little less Chronos. Winter is a time of hardship, but also cleansing. You know, it's a no-fly zone for many pests and parasites that thrive in the tropics. I like to say paradise comes with parasites. I'd rather shovel snow and rake leaves. Can I make space for gratitude and reverence amid the transforming change of seasons, all kinds of seasons? Like Earth herself, sometimes we move through the seasons of our personal orbits a little faster, sometimes a little slower. But thankfully, we're not all in the same life season at the same time. Of course, we will grieve, and still, spring will come, and summer will follow. Likewise, summers of laughter and abundance give way to autumns of worry and loss. Beloved community is here to help us remember, a chalice of love and support through it all. As the song goes, it's time now to sing out, though the story never ends. How do you measure a year? Measure in love, seasons of love. May it be so, and amen. And now, thanks to the amazingness of Eli and the choir, we get to actually hear the song.